Yep, go.
Okay. Start.
Hi everybody, and thank you to our third webinar of our LGBTQ celebratory series. Today we're talking about LGBTQ staff networks. We have three colleagues joined us who I'm really pleased to say will be talking about their experiences and why and how we have staff networks. I wanted just to say this webinar is particularly important because it's this guys who supported me to think about how we might have a webinar series, and it is the issues, the concerns and the thoughts arising from these groups that influence what we've done this week and moving through the month. So lots to tell us, lots to learn. We've got Adam Harrison, Daniel Hallam and David McCluskey talking to us today. The usual format. Any questions, please put them in the chat. There will be a chance for those at the end. And if you could complete the SurveyMonkey evaluation form at the end that Evo will post in chat, that also would be really, really helpful for us to gauge and develop sessions moving forward. So I'm going to hand over to Adam. And as I say, any questions at the end? Enjoy.
Hi everyone, my name is Adam Harrison. I'm the chair of the LGBTQA+ staff network at Warrington and Halton Teaching Hospitals, and my pronouns are he, him. So in my day job, I'm also the Patient Experience and Inclusion Manager at Warrington and Halton, which is an acute NHS Foundation trust. And my role really is to ensure that equality and inclusion is the golden thread that connects all that we do for our patients, our service users, and ultimately our workforce as the staff network chair, ultimately with the aim of reducing health inequalities in the healthcare sector. But I'm also a gay man who works for the NHS, and I feel pretty proud to be able to say that out loud. But I also recognise that in the past, I wouldn't have been having this platform to be able to say that without the fear of discrimination. And I know that to some of our colleagues, we still have that existing. And that's the whole point of why we introduce a staff network within our organisations. So I started with the NHS in July 2019, and I previously worked in different roles in the private sector, mainly in retail. But since starting with the NHS, I've been lucky enough to be part of a lot of work to support both our workforce and our patients from an ED&I perspective. And as part of that, I was lucky enough to be part of launching the Rainbow Badge Initiative at Warrington and Halton, which was a real way of showing that we're an open, non-judgmental trust which celebrates the LGBT+ community, but we also take a zero tolerance approach on discrimination. So our staff network was formed in September 2020 following an internal virtual Pride celebration. And we meet on a monthly basis, but due to COVID-19, we do meet virtually. And the plan is, I think what's really wonderful about COVID-19 is that we continue the virtual meetings in place long term, because the positive effect of virtual meetings means that you can potentially get access to the people who can't take the full time away from the working environment. They get a chance to log on, take a breather, have a brew, and talk to everyone with a common interest and really drive to focus and ensure that the matters in the organisation focus on LGBTQ as well as everything else. And the chance to start an LGBTQA+ staff network for me was an honour. It was an opportunity to begin by making a difference across the organisation, really champion the LGBTQ voice and ensuring that the network started the process of ensuring that people-related matters address the inequalities and discrimination faced by the LGBTQ community today. And I think it's really important to really listen to what people want in your own organisation and teams. So for me personally, I found that by reacting to what my fellow LGBTQ+ voice and colleagues feel and want is about ensuring that the network is focusing on people-related matters by starting to address the inequalities and the discriminations that are faced on a daily basis. But what's the real success of the NHS? And I think we've heard that question asked so many times in the last 12 months. And the real success is the people. It's the greatest asset to the NHS. And what's the real success of a staff network is also celebrating the diversity that is in an organisation. It's celebrating the diversity of the LGBTQ community. It's raising awareness of the issues that are faced, the inequalities, the evidential data that we know exists within healthcare, within our populations, but also increasing the education on LGBTQ matters, focusing on looking at pronouns, looking at what gender identity actually means. So just as I end my introduction to you all, I want to go back to one point I made earlier. Yes, I can sit here and talk to you about the LGBTQ+ staff network at Warrington and Holton. And yes, I'm able to talk about the journey we're on, what's to come, what matters to the LGBT community in the NHS. But I've also got to highlight that it's not the same for everyone. We still have a far way to go before we can say that we're truly fully inclusive, before LGBTQ matters are a part of the general discussion from the beginning, and to make sure that that really is the sense of equality. But we are on an incredible journey. And just sitting here today and to be able to say that there's been LGBT History Month webinars throughout the entire month focusing on the matters that are important to LGBT is a real sign of what's to come and how we can continue to drive it through staff networks within an organisation. So thank you.
David, it's you.
Yeah, it's me now. I saw the red line. Hi, my name is David McCluskey. I'm the chair of NHS England and Improvements LGBTQ+ network in the northwest of England. We're a very fledgling network, so for anybody that's out there that wants to join, you've not missed very many meetings. We only really started the meetings in December. The purpose of our network is just a safe space to get together with people, like-minded people, talk to each other, maybe talk to each other about things that aren't COVID related as well. And I'm sure most people would be quite happy to be able to talk about something other than COVID, given the current circumstances. For me, it's important to be part of the network and to lead the network. You know, I've despite my youthful looks, I'm a child of the 80s. I grew up in a time when Clause 28 was in force, where it was unacceptable and it was illegal to actually promote being gay as a normal lifestyle. So for me, we really need to make sure that all of those rights that we've fought for over the years are maintained. It's, you know, as we've seen in America over the last 4 years, we've seen in Russia in the last few years, LGBT+ rights are being slowly whittled away, and that could easily happen in this country as well. You know, don't believe that it wouldn't happen in this country. You know, we're very lucky, we're very privileged to live in a time when, you know, we have equal marriage, we can adopt, we can foster, but I think you know, especially for our trans and non-binary colleagues, you know, some of the rights that we've got as lesbian and gay people, you know, I think trans and non-binary people don't quite have the same respect within the wider community that LGBT people have. So I think it's important we need to keep putting pressure on, making sure that our organisations that we work for are still recognising the diversity of our population and making sure that the workforce reflects the population that we work for within the NHS. Normally in my day job, I work in the clinical network. I'm a mental health nurse by background, and my day job is working alongside mental health trusts to make sure that people's mental health needs are met across, you know, the whole of the northwest of England, and hopefully, you know, reduce inequalities, reduce postcode lotteries for mental health services. But I believe that the reason why I've ended up in mental health is because of things like Clause 28. You know, if you think of the damage that was done by such a heinous piece of legislation, the impact that could have had on, you know, children's mental health, young people's development, that's the thing that's kind of driven me on throughout my life, to make sure that no child ever grows up being ashamed of who they really are. So that's why I've ended up doing this. People who know me won't be surprised that I'm the chair of the LGBT network, because I'm a bit bolshy. I do enjoy a fight, I do enjoy an argument. So, you know, if NHS England is, you know, bringing out new staff policies that aren't quite meeting the needs of our LGBT plus staff colleagues, then our job is to hold them to account, ask them awkward questions, and make sure that our voice is heard. And the purpose of the meetings that we have, the monthly meetings, is really just for people to either, you know, we can sit and have a chat and have a brew and have a laugh, or people can highlight some of the difficulties they've been having, especially if you know, they're experiencing discrimination or bullying or something like that due to their sexuality or their gender identity. So that's the purpose of the network. As I say, we meet on a monthly basis. My contact details and my email address will be getting circulated at the end of this webinar. All you need to do is just drop me an email, tell me you want to join the network, and I'll send you the Teams invite. The meetings have only ever been virtual because COVID has scuppered any chance to meet face to face. So hopefully at some stage in the future we might actually get to meet people face to face. But for the moment they're on MS Teams. So as I say, drop me a line and hopefully see you at the next network meeting on, I think it's the 16th of February.
That's brilliant, David, thanks. And there's already questions about joining details. So if Ivo could post your email in the chat before we get to your slide, that would be excellent.
Yes, I will do.
Brilliant, thank you very much.
Daniel, you on mute, just to unmute your microphone.
You'd expect the person in technology to actually not do the mute thing. So hopefully you can see the wonderful picture rather than my camera. So I'm Daniel Hallen. I am the Head of Digital Technology and Digital Urgent Emergency Care for the Northwest region for NHS-E&I. I'm also the Vice Chair for the LGBT plus staff network here in the Northwest. Contrary to the image that I've put up, I am not a clinician by background, I'm a techie by background, but I've made a point over the last few years to certainly work alongside frontline clinicians. So the picture is me at Bolton Hospital working with some of the electronic patient record deployment, and I was working in theatres for a few weeks, so hence the garb and the get-up. I'm fortunate to be in a position which affords me regional and national access. Like everybody, we're all busy and we have a busy life, but I feel it really important to support the network across the Northwest to enable our LGBT the staff within the organisation. Very passionate about equality and diversity, and I come from a different presentation now. Come from a multicultural family. The NHS is a very varied organisation that brings together so many different disciplines. It's one of the largest organisations, employers in this country, and we touch many lives. We also have the power and the place to make a genuine positive difference in people's lives. So, you know, whether that's LGBT plus or whether that's across the BAME networks, disability networks, we have a very important place in what we do. We touch people from the cradle to the grave throughout their lives. Our values of compassion and inclusiveness are values that we live and breathe on a daily basis here in the NHS. And as in conversations with one of my colleagues from the BAME staff network, it's not just about being identified within a very specific network, it is also about being identified as an ally. How can we live allyship on a daily basis? Obviously, it's LGBT plus History Month, and it's very important to reflect on the achievements of equality that we have accomplished over the last 40 or 50 years, from decriminalisation in the late 60s to, as David said, you know, some of the legislation that was brought in the late 80s, to the removal of that in the early noughties, to marriage equality a mere few years ago. But, you know, that is always something that we feel like we've had to fight to get. We've had to take that journey. We've only seen the last few days where the new president of the US, Joe Biden, has issued an executive decree which has reversed a piece of discriminatory legislation to allow people of trans people back into the armed forces in the States. That was a right that was a right that was won over very, very hard-fought years up until the Trump administration, and then Trump basically it arbitrarily removed it. Joe Biden has reversed that, so we're starting to see a sense of normality coming back, but it shows how fragile some of those rights can be. And even now, when we're sort of looking at the direction that Britain is taking, there are still many countries around the world, like Uganda, Brunei, many countries who have appalling records when it comes to LGBT+. What we have seen in recent years is the growth of appalling transphobia and erasure of trans people and non-binary people in parts of the media. It does remind me a lot of the battles of my youth. Like David, I'm a child of the 80s. I remember the Section 28. I also remember the Anderton years. Anderton was the Chief Constable of Greater Manchester, who was deeply oppressive of the LGBT community, raiding the various parts of Canal Street, etc., on a regular basis. And we've had a difficult journey over the years, but even now that journey is still there. You know, assumptions around a person's gender, assumptions around the gender of a person's partner. We need to sort of work through some of this stuff to say, how can we make this better so that people feel more comfortable in the workplace and feel that they can be who they are and be all that they can be. We have so many skills that we bring to the NHS. Like I said, we are a varied and diverse organisation. What we want to enable is that people feel 100% that they can contribute, not 50%. So I'm very much here to support David in his role as the chair, but also my contact details are on the screen. And you know, please do engage with me, and I want to be here to be a voice for people that feel that they don't have a voice. I'll shut up now.
Daniel, thanks. That's really, really powerful. There was a number of questions in the chat which I just wanted to share to get some conversation going. So a couple of people have asked about Adam's experience, but really it applies to all of you, of establishing a network. So kind of the steps to go through, the conversations to be had and with whom. And also, more importantly, and I think this is really important, particularly at the moment, because we are seeing networks evolving, popping up all over the place. How do we sustain those networks and embed them? Adam, perhaps do you want to go first on that, and then I'll pull in David and Daniel.
Yeah, definitely. I think there's a lot of work that's got to go into a network, and I think one thing that's very, very clear is that you've got to react to your own organisation, and you've got to react to what your organisation wants. So I can see the question from Barry is, how did Adam find recruiting LGBTQ+ to the network? And that's a continuous journey, because it's about building trust and creating that safe space and to really know that we're going to address the issues, but it's the so what piece that sits behind it. So by having this staff network, what am I going to get from the staff network being a member of the LGBTQ+ community in the NHS? And I think one thing that's really clear for me is the work that we've already started to do. So for example, at Warrington and Halton, we really took a chance to mark occasions last year since we started in September, such as Transgender Day of Remembrance, taking that moment to really raise awareness, taking a moment to educate the organisation on what that day really is. Also focusing on World AIDS Day, we put together some charitable raising funds and really focusing on delivering some bite-sized training on what HIV is, reducing the stigma, talking about U equals U, and really bringing the conversation to light of what information's needed. And I think going into that conversation, and especially with so many staff networks, as Oliver said, coming around in the NHS and at all different corners, I get asked a lot why I include A within the staff network. So my staff network stands for lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer or questioning, and then ally. And the ally for me is so passionate. It's about making sure that we have the right allies in the organisation. And allies are such an important support for the LGBTQ+ community, but it's also important to highlight how allies are important for everyone. And it's about talking about intersectionality when you're looking at networks. So at Warrington and Halton, for example, we have 4 staff networks, and we come together on a regular occasion to discuss what we're planning, what we're doing, and see how we can support the organisation and ultimately hold it accountable to make sure that the matters related to LGBTQ are on the agenda. And one of the points that we've spoken about quite a lot is around that work of allyship. And it's really important that a true ally is someone who educates themselves. They do the research, they ask the questions, they listen to someone, they amplify others' voices. They're not afraid to have that difficult conversation. And I think what's really important is that as a network, we support our allies with how to react to them difficult conversations. How do we confront LGBTQ plus hate? How do we confront racism? And have them difficult conversations, but in order to spread awareness and educate. And then finally, I think one of the key points for me is about being vocal and visible to others. So whether that be support to other events in the organisation, for example, as I said, World AIDS Day, with LGBT History Month, asking the questions to support and bringing your own thoughts to the table is so important, because it's all coming together in how we work. I don't know if David and Daniel have got any other points that they wanted to add there.
I mean, obviously, our network is much more fledgling compared to yours, Adam. I mean, what I've been doing, so I became the chair of the NHS England and Improvement one I think it was in July of last year. So basically what I've been doing is kind of trying to manage up the way. So I go to quite a number of different kind of HR type meetings, kind of senior management meetings, to be the representative of the network. And that was before we actually set up the network. So I sit in the national executive LGBT network, and then I was kind of tasked with setting up the staff network, the internal staff network. What I'm going to be doing and what the network's going to be doing is supporting our internal staff. It's more for the NHS England and Improvement staff rather than looking outwards, but that's something that we'll be working towards alongside Anthony, is to start feeding out into the wider NHS organisations and wider trusts. We're, you know, as I say, we're fledgling at the moment. What we've been doing is really just, you know, if you come along to the meeting, invite a colleague with you. One of the things I've been slightly frustrated about was how do I identify colleagues who may want to join the network. I did ask, you know, for my email to be circulated into the wider system. The feedback I received at the time was we've tried that before and it never really worked. So I wasn't really sure what I was supposed to do after that, because it's not really possible for me to kind of identify LGBT plus colleagues. You know, we can't look at people's HR records or anything like that. It really has to be word of mouth at the moment to identify colleagues who want to join. I have this week written a couple of articles which have been shared on the staff newsletter, which has gone out literally this morning. It's got my contact details in it and a little bit of my background and a little bit of background as to why I wanted to be the chair of the network. So if you've not read it, please read it. As I say, my contact details are there. If people want to join, you know, feel free to just drop me a line.
And do you know what, David? I think coming back to what you were saying then is such an important part, is that it's partnership working ultimately that I think will be the success of LGBTQ plus networks across the NHS, because it's sharing that best practice, and ultimately we all have a different lived experience, and it's how does that continue to grow. And I think it's also around how do we learn from what's been successful with our BAME staff networks, what's been successful with disability staff networks. It's ultimately around coming together as one for an inclusion point of view to really focus on delivering and making sure that our LGBTQ plus colleagues feel accepted in work, and ultimately lead that towards patient inequalities as well, and really focus on them health inequalities that we know are out there. And I was just reading a question then from Barry around LGBTQIA training for allies, and I think it's so important that that does come from staff networks and endorsed from staff networks across an organisation, because the biggest part of allied training is ultimately living that lived experience that you're not aware of, and knowing what that means and what it means to be, for example, a gay man in the NHS. How does that make me feel? What barriers do I face that someone else might not? And that's the allyship that comes along. And I think it's so important that we work together, take best practice and learn from what we're experiencing in different parts of the NHS to actually ultimately make sure that NHS LGBTQA+ staff networks are continuous and they are a successful network that provides insight to the NHS in order to improve both from a workforce and a patient point of view.
Mm. Absolutely.
Thanks, Adam. That's really helpful. Can I just bring Daniel in, because I know he hasn't had a chance to speak, and I'm really keen to hear a couple of things about his views on setting up a network, being part of a network, but also how we sustain the network. So, you know, one of the issues about setting up networks is oftentimes they're led by one or two people. How do we sustain them and make them resilient?
That's an awfully good question. So a network is by its very sort of meaning, it is a group of people, and you know, it's a group of people that will make or break a network and make a network successful. What is critical is that you know, we focus on as Adam has said, you know, bringing things to the fore, to say that this is, you know, that we want to remind people about the history, that the celebration, the different points in the year where we can sort of focus on specific issues. So that is absolutely important. But as David said, you know, we are a fledgling network, and what we need to do is get that ground set under us. We need to sort of focus on how we get people joining in with the network and saying, right, okay, this is what we want the network to be about. I think it's fair to say that neither David nor I are going to be the ones that set the full direction of things. What we want to do is we want to take the direction from the group of people to say, what is it you want from a network? You know, how are we going to develop the network over the next few years? What is it that we can do to A, celebrate the diversity that the network will bring, but B, as David very importantly said, you know, this is about making sure that staff feel that the organisation in which they are working supports them. And if you're an LGBT+ member of staff, you want to know that you can come to work in a safe place, that you can raise issues, that you can talk about things, that something as simple as that you may wish to take some adoption leave with your same gender partner. And that can be a difficult conversation if the organisation that you work for doesn't support you. I'm fortunate to work in an environment where that is an open conversation. So for people like myself, David, Adam, Anthony, and others, what we want to do is use this as a vehicle to make sure that, you know, the fullest amount of leadership is behind LGBT+, certainly from the Northwest region. You know, this comes from the top. Bill McCarthy absolutely supports this as our regional director, and we have a number of chief execs across the organisations that absolutely visibly make statements in support of LGBT+ communities. But I sort of want to sort of point out as well that what is important is that a network will last as long as a network is wanted and needed. So it is not a case of simply turn up to meetings and talk about stuff and then off we go and don't do anything. It's the stuff that goes behind that. It's the stuff of, you know, how do we make a real difference in not just staff lives but our patients' lives, and how do we sort of bring those lived experience forward so that we can make positive changes in the way that we work together, in the way that we work with our patients, in the way that as an organisation we celebrate the diversity of absolutely everybody that works here.
Yeah.
You're on mute. Somebody had to do it.
I am sorry, and that was amazing what I said on mute. I'll never repeat anything as amazing again, and I won't remember it. I'm just responding to some of the questions in chat because I can only type as quickly as I can type. We've just had a question around token share. So whether reflecting and involving minority staff through could be seen as tokenist. I was just typing a response, but I wondered what the panel thought. So really what I was saying was that this webinar series has been fully co-produced with and by LGBT colleagues. I understand how that view could be held, but I really think that this illustrates our commitment to really making a co-produced and meaningful difference.
Yeah.
What do the panel think about that?
I mean, for me, as I said, I enjoy an argument. So, you know, there's no way this is tokenistic from NHS England's point of view. If it was tokenistic, they're in for a shock, because, you know, I'll be happy to hold them to account. But as Daniel says, you know, Bill McCarthy has sponsored this, you know, right from the very top. He did the introduction on Monday. This is something he's been very keen on. As I said, I attend, you know, HR governance meetings and have been doing since July of last year. And, you know, the direction travel has been very clear. We need to have an LGBT plus network in the northwest of England. And it's been my responsibility to set it up. So, you know, and the network, as Daniel says, the network will be what people want it to be. It's not about my agenda. It's not about Daniel's agenda. It's about what people bring to the table and what discussions that we have. You know, I'm very fortunate. You know, I've got a really supportive manager. I've got a really supportive team of staff that I work with. I'm open, and you know, I'm openly gay with my colleagues. You know, and I'm very lucky to live in a time when I can do that. But there will be other people, as Daniel says, who work in other parts of the organisation who, for whatever reason, might not have that relationship with their colleagues and their boss. They might not feel comfortable or confident to be able to come out. So the network is about having those kind of conversations and making sure that that person feels support from within the organisation, and we can, you know, maybe point them in the right direction around some of the issues that they might be experiencing. Myself and Daniel, not to cast aspersions on Daniel's age, but you know, myself and Daniel have been around the block a bit longer than Adam, perhaps. So we've seen quite a lot of discrimination over the years.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
We've seen discrimination over the years, you know, and had to face that down. Whereas now, you know, I think as I said, for the lesbian and gay population, you know, we're doing quite well now. I think what we need to do is make sure that our trans and non-binary colleagues feel as welcomed and as safe and supported, because, you know, those are the next battles that we need to win.
That's really good. Can I just to answer one of the questions, or just to expand on one of the questions in the chat? So what people won't know on the call necessarily is that I'm head of VDI for the Northwest region, and I wanted to give my commitment to both to this webinar series, which I was really keen that we launch and support and enable, but also that what we do is from the learning that comes out of it on a day-to-day basis, because that's what makes the difference. So all of us will learn from this experience. We will all take away. It is also for us to hold others to account about how we learn from each other and how we make a difference on a day-to-day basis. I do think the last thing we want to do is to flag the needs of our LGBTQ plus colleagues for 1 week, for 1 month of the year. That's not what this is about. This is about really hearing, listening and learning and acting together differently. So I hear the question, I really get the concern, but I do think we are committed to really making it feel different. I'm also a gay man and I absolutely live this every day, as we all do, and I walk it and I talk it. So I think we all have a responsibility to kind of really push back and out and challenge what we see that isn't good. Couple more questions.
I'd just like to add as well, Anthony, if I may.
Of course.
So certainly on the tokenship, I mean, you know, this what we do pervades everything that we are involved with. So, you know, I lead lots of work on digital inclusion. I'm also doing a master's in digital inclusion. So if I look at the digital workforce across the Northwest, from our, you know, providers, from our CCGs, from our ICS footprints, you know, they are passionate about inclusion and about sort of getting dealing with health inequalities, and that goes across the whole spectrum. But realistically, in the Northwest here, we are very much actively focusing on inclusion across the whole digital landscape. So this is not just about making sure somebody's got a tablet or making sure they've got access to the internet, things like that. This is about, you know, how does the being black change your interaction with the health services through digital? How does being a member of the LGBT plus community change that? How does being old, young, etc., etc.? So, you know, as Dave said, you know, thank you for the comments on age. You know, that there are differences in opinion of how we do things in terms of age. So we want to make sure that this is not just a a one-time thing. This has got to pervade our culture, and it's about the values that we bring to work on a daily basis. So, yes. Thanks for that, Anthony. I think you might have frozen.
Me? It's amazing how you freeze in a really unattractive pose always, isn't it? I always find that. Can I just a couple of other things? So people are also asking about the most challenging thing of establishing a network, and also how we embrace people who identify as LGBTQ but aren't out, and how we support and enable them to play a part in this. Can I go to Adam first, as Daniel's preoccupied with drinking?
Of course. I think what's really interesting, there's two parts to that really, isn't there? So the challenge faced by networks is overall it's buy-in, and it's how do you ensure that you've got the buy-in of the senior leadership. And I think in the Northwest, from an NHS England perspective, I think Daniel and you've discussed how much buy-in is there, in this webinar series for our LGBT History Month is a prime example. From looking at it from a standalone trust, so if I look at it from a Warrington and Halton perspective, I sit on the EDI steering group that goes through to the executive board. I have a voice there as an LGBTQ plus member of the organisation, and I can take the views of the LGBTQ staff network forward and to really help shape and drive the organisation. So I think from a challenge point of view, it's continuing that buy-in from both the senior leadership team within the organisation, but also to continue that buy-in from the members of the LGBTQ plus community. If we don't deliver what we are saying that we will look at as a, whether it be discrimination or inequalities, for example, Danny, I think you mentioned there about 2 LGBTQ plus members looking at adoption leave. If we don't look at how we can address situations like that in organisations, then we won't be able to continue, because we'll lose that buy-in from our members. I think looking at it from LGBTQ staff who aren't out, I think that's where, in a sense, virtual meetings has been a blessing in disguise, because people don't have to attend with the name or the camera on or the microphone on. They can have input and attend as a guest that's completely anonymous. And from lived experience in this organisation, as part of my staff network, I've had people do that, and it allows them to feed in information, allows them to pass on their views of how they feel. Because ultimately, I think one thing that we forget on National Coming Out Day is that we don't just come out once as a member of the LGBTQ plus community. We come out every time we move to a different job, every time we meet a new team, every time we meet a new group of people. I, at some point in my time, have to say that my partner's also a man. And or the question is, so what does your partner do? What's your wife do? What are you doing when you get home? Are you cooking your wife's tea? That's a genuine question that is asked so openly, and that's the identity loss that people feel, because automatically there's been an assumption made, and that's the culture that needs to change, and that's part of what the drive to inclusivity is. And I know I'm talking on here, but I just wanted to touch on that token point before. As an LGBTQ staff network, we have the opportunity to make the conversation daily, and we have an opportunity to really drive that, so that the organisation doesn't wait to Pride Month, or we don't wait to LGBT History Month to celebrate the diversity. We live and breathe it every day, and make sure that every people, policy or process or patient related matter is addressed as an LGBTQ lived experience at the same time. Thank you.
That's great. Thanks, Adam. David or Daniel, any update on that bit? So it was about the challenge, and it was about how we support colleagues and peers who aren't out at work but want to play a part.
Yeah, I mean, you know, we're a very relaxed, very small group. You know, there is no expectations on people to come along. As Adam says, you know, if you want to come along to the meeting, you don't need to turn your camera on, you don't need to speak. You know, it's just a safe space where people can come along and just, you know, be themselves if they want to. As I said, it's, you know, talk about something other than COVID as well. Now, the national LGBT plus network has a coffee afternoon on a Friday that people can dip in and out of. You know, there's no agenda. There's no, you don't need to introduce yourself. It's very informal. You know, they do daft stuff like dressing up, or, you know, drink alcohol or whatever if you felt that was what you wanted to do. The other thing about the network is you know, if you don't want to come along to the meetings, that's fine. But you can just set it up that you know, I'll include you in emails, or you can email me and have conversations that way. If it's something that you don't want to be, you know, you could be sitting at home, and home might not be a safe space for you to actually be talking about your experiences. But you know, you can drop me a line and we can have a dialogue that way as well. So it's whatever people want. You know, it's not for us to, you know, it's not like we expect you to stand up and announce yourself at the meetings. You know, it's very relaxed, it's very informal. So you know, please, if you're struggling and you just feel you need that safe space to you know, express who you are, then we can do that, you know, in a variety of ways. It doesn't need to be that you have to talk out loud or anything like that. It's just somewhere that you can feel safe and feel that there's like-minded people there that can listen to you and that can help you and give you some advice. You're on mute again, Anthony.
I am. Daniel, did you want to add anything to that?
No, I think the two chaps captured it very well. The only thing I will say is I know that as people are watching this, they're probably thinking, wow, you're a very representative bunch of 4 guys. You know, this is, you know, we have a wonderfully diverse network within the staff network. And, you know, we do recognise that just on a male-female gender split, and those that are non-binary as well, including there, you know, the proportion of people that are in the NHS is generally a much higher level of women that work for the NHS. So, you know, we do have a very wide body of people that are sitting within the staff network, but I do recognise that looking at the panel today, it may not look like that.
Yeah, it's unfortunate that I'm afraid the availability was limited for the webinars, but we do appreciate, we want full representation and we're working towards that. I'm just posting in chat, we only have a few minutes remaining. If there are any outstanding questions, I'm sure that Adam, David and Daniel or myself will very happily answer them if you want to reach out to us after the webinar is over. I'd really like to thank Daniel, Adam and David for their contributions today. This is a really, really powerful conversation that we're having here and so much positive energy.
Can I just also say that, you know, of the 4 of us, Adam is the one that's made the most effort in terms of dress sense, whereas the rest of us felt that we were all a little bit more relaxed. So, you know, well done to Adam for making the effort that the rest of us clearly didn't.
So you guys have posted your contact details, haven't you, on the slides at the beginning? And there we are, and subsequent support information there. Evo helpfully posted it further up the chat, the link to the other webinars. So we've also got a series of other webinars leading us through the remainder of the month. And we have recorded the session and we will be circulating the link to this and the other webinar should anybody be interested.
Can I also just add one thing? So this not something that I've necessarily put on this slide here, but it has popped up on Twitter from members of the LGBT community who are working in our frontline environments, who are struggling with the stresses and strain of everything that's going on at the moment. We do have an NHS staff support line. If you Google NHS staff support line, it will come up with a number that you can ring. They are an organisation that will essentially our own version of Samaritans, if you will. So they will listen and support you. So I just wanted to put that out there. You know, Google NHS staff support line if you do feel that you need to talk to somebody. Well, there's other links on the LGBT plus specific on the screen in front of you.
Marvellous, that's great. Thank you all so very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Stay safe. Have a great weekend.
Take care, everybody.
Okay, bye.